showcase about our waste week that we delivered at Leeds, but let's start off by introducing ourselves, and I'll pass to my colleague firstly, that's Claire.
Hello, nice to meet you all. I'm Claire Gaunt. I'm one of the Assistant Directors of Finance at LTHT.
Thank you, Claire. And Natasha?
Hi, I'm Natasha Atasha, and I'm a Senior Programme Manager at LTHT as well.
Thank you, Tash. And my name is Richard Norman. I'm head of the Programme Management Office at Leeds. That's a PMO that sits high, fundamentally within finance. So welcome. Next slide. Thank you. It looks like you all have anyway, but I'm going to encourage everyone to turn their cameras on. This is an interactive session. That's going to put fear into you all, isn't it? But we're going to make you earn your supper today, I'm afraid. So if you could keep your cameras on, that would be great. That gives us a chance to see who's who. So thank you. Next slide. Thanks. So let's start off. Let's get some definitions sorted, shall we? So firstly, in the context of NHS inefficiency, what is waste to us? Thank you, Tash. Thank you. So VMI, that's the Virginia Mason Institute. That's the institute that Leeds contracted with to inform our Leeds Improvement Method, our continuous improvement approach and methodology. And their description and definition of waste is anything that refers to the part of the process that is not valuable. And at Leeds, we sort of pitch that very similarly, as waste is identified as anything that does not add value from the perspective of our patients. We're going to talk about, we'll use the phrase waste reduction today. It's not related to trash or emptying bins or anything, but if you understand those definitions of waste, our waste reduction is our SIP programme at Leeds. And waste reduction to us is about removing wasteful practices to enhance efficiencies and foster financial sustainability. And the purpose of today's presentation is, of course, about our Waste Week that we delivered, and that was a week-long event designed to raise awareness of waste issues and to focus attention on the identification and removal of waste. And we do that within 7 areas of waste. Thanks, Tash. And there's a little image noting what they are. These were developed as part of the Toyota approach to continuous improvement. And so we look at waste in those 7 areas: inventory, weighting, defects, overproduction, motion, transportation, and overprocessing. Thank you. Next slide. So our Waste Week. Thanks, Tash. So what is it? So it was about creating, what do we want to do? Creating improvement ideas from the delivery of a finance Waste Week. We have a Waste Week approach that we use at Leeds, and it's used across a lot, if not all, of our clinical units. And again, thank you, Tash. And how did we do it? So we delivered a service-wide finance Waste Week to identify waste and develop improvement plans to remove waste and add value. Next slide, thanks. The objective of this were we wanted to spotlight waste so that we could keep waste removal as a top priority within the function. We wanted to educate teams waste removal activities so that they can identify waste, remove the root cause of those wastes, as opposed to implementing workarounds. We wanted to use the right improvement teams and at the right time, and we wanted to support teams develop their annual improvement plan, which each team within finance does at Leeds. Thank you. We wanted to allow our senior leaders in finance to have a sight of those improvements that the teams wanted to make in order that they could play a part in helping support them and those teams and remove the barriers and challenges that might arise. We wanted to embed that culture of continuous improvement. That's a really strong theme at Leeds and incredibly strong within finance, but we wanted to embed that even more so. We wanted to help teams to understand the importance of setting a psychological safe space and environment to share issues, ideas, and to make them empowered to make changes that they were within their gift to make. And we wanted to do that all collaboratively, and that's a really key word for us. It's one of our trust values, and that was really keen for us to do that all collaboratively. So thank you. So we did it. We embarked on a Waste Week. So purpose of which was to focus on waste in our processes and think about how we could remove them. So we conducted an initial scoping meeting with team leads to determine that we got the pitch right and we had all the elements lined up. We designed a calendar of 30-minute learning bursts, and Natasha will touch on that later on. And we allocated some protected time for teams to meet within Waste Week and to use the tools and the techniques and the approaches that they learned from the learning bursts in the calendar. We asked then, one of the outcomes was we asked teams to identify and document and then submit to us their top 5 ideas for improvements. And again, Claire and Natasha will touch on those improvements that were submitted to us. And we got team leads to sign an event leader agreement. So we had some buy-in from every team that was within finance. Thank you, Tash. Our week was formally launched by our Director of Finance. That was in conjunction with a lead from our improvement team as well. And we started with a 1 hour long Monday morning session for all staff. So all staff were invited. It was a Teams meeting. And this was to set out why the week was important and how the week would run and what was expected of individuals and teams within that week. And we thought this helped overcome the challenges of how we might spotlight waste removal so that finance could see and keep waste removal as a top priority, and that's continued. And as I said, the week consisted of a series, and we had 23 short 30-minute learning bursts that any staff member could attend as their choosing. And there's a little image of a calendar there, and I'll now pass to Natasha, who will talk a bit more about the events in that calendar. Thanks, Tash.
No worries. So the next middle section is going to be a little bit of a taste of what we did in the week. We wanted to give you a bit of insight into what concepts did we teach, how did we go about teaching them, what did we ask the teams to then do once they'd absorbed all that learning afterwards, and what were some of the outcomes of those sessions. And one of the first things that we did, more or less at the beginning of every single one of these 23 sessions that we did, was think about how we set the right tone for this. So we were going to ask teams to talk about things that didn't particularly work within their processes, and to then go back and have wider discussions with their teams and possibly other teams as well, depending on the nature of the problem. So we knew that we wanted to be able to set the right environment, and Richard's already touched on that we thought psychological safety was really important. So we wanted to set teams up with that, both in the sessions themselves and then so that they could take some of that away and use some of that when they go back to their teams. And it was a bit of a 2 birds, 1 stone. I wanted to get everybody talking and make it a really interactive session. So what I did was put up this slide and say, right, these are some of the ways that we think we should work together. What do you think I'm trying to get at by showing you some of these icons? So I'm going to do the same with you guys now. It's an interactive session. We want you to start talking. So we're going to break the ice. You can unmute yourself and give me a shout out. What do you think I'm trying to get at of any of these icons? How can we set the right tone in our ways of working together?
Listening to each other.
Absolutely, yeah. So the ear was all about listening, and especially that listen to understand, don't just listen to immediately respond. Really, really try and listen to what that person is saying. Any others?
A safe and confidential environment with the kind of lock and key.
Fabulous, yeah. So what's said in the room stays in the room. Like, it wasn't like Hogwarts, like you're not allowed to tell people that you go there. It was, you know, we can have those discussions, but maybe keep names, keep other bits out of it. But yeah, confidentiality, definitely. Any others?
Would the picture of the people at the bottom there, would that be like embracing uniquenesses or differences?
Absolutely, yeah. So within the Leeds improvement method and this wider waste week, everybody's opinion is so vital, regardless of role, banding, background, anything. We want to hear everybody's ideas. Everybody's ideas are as valuable to us. So we wanted all of that stuff, all of that inclusivity. Brilliant. Any other takers?
Asking questions.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah, ask tons of questions, no silly questions. Ask as many as you possibly can and keep asking why, and we'll get to that later on. Ask why at least 5 times. Any takers for the love heart here? With the little hands around it. No? Oh, so this was about being kind
Compassion?
to yourself.
Mm.
Yes, compassion. Brilliant. So
Yeah.
having compassion, not just for those around you, but also for yourself as well. Like, it's really tough to admit that, you know, maybe some of your work doesn't add value. That can be a bit of a hard pill to swallow. So be compassionate to everybody around you and to yourself. And the last one is a bit of a harder one. Any guesses? I struggled with this. I struggled to find an icon for it, really. So I'll let you off the hook with that. So this one was more about thinking about how you naturally work within your environment. So if you're more of an extrovert and you're really keen to speak, try and leave a bit of space for the more introverted people. Quite often, they have amazing ideas and you don't get to hear them. So it was a bit of a push as well. So if you are a natural introvert, try and push yourself to maybe share some of the things, because we miss out on what's inside your brain so often. So it was a great way of helping people set the right tone within sort of the 30-minute learning burst, and to then go back to their teams and maybe do the same. But it also got them talking as well. So it was a great little tool. And the first thing we're going to go into is how we started the week. We thought it was really a really key point to start the week by thinking about some of the mental valleys that we might be in. And that might be a foreign concept to people. Mental valleys are actually part of the NHS's 3 principles behind the tools of directed creativity. Oh, say that fast twice. And it's about this attention stage here. So how do we put some attention on problems, and critically, how do we maybe see problems that we've never seen before? So mental valleys, they form as we learn. So as you do the same repetitive task over and over again, a mental valley will form in your mind. And it can be really, really useful for helping us get things done really quickly, and useful for communication. You know, if you had to really think about every turn that you took on your way to work every morning, you'd be exhausted by the time you got to work. So sometimes they're really useful for us to just have that learned behavior. But when it comes to doing something innovative or doing something different, they can be a bit of a barrier. So we really wanted to get people to think about where they might be in a bit of a mental valley, thinking about their own work, before we started to think about improvements. So the best example I have of this is crossing the road. So here within England, we look left, we look right, and we cross the road. And that keeps us safe every day. It helps us do things quick and fast. Brilliant. But if we want to do something different, say we went across to France for the weekend, looking left and looking right isn't going to keep us safe anymore. The process has changed. So what we do needs to change as well. So with that in mind, what we asked skipping ahead of myself. One of the key things that we wanted to stress to people are that mental valleys are all the assumptions that you make about your work, and they could be good or they could be bad. Like I said, sometimes they keep us safe, but sometimes they don't. And if we want to think about doing something differently, we have to really think about those things. So we did an exercise with the teams. Once we'd explained what mental valleys were, we wanted them to have a real think about it. So we said, we want you to have a real think and pay attention to the autopilot things that you do, and the things that have been that way for a long time, because that's probably where we're in the biggest mental valleys. So where are those things that we've always done it that way, or we've always done it then at that point in time? It's always done by that person. All of those things we wanted them to have a look at. And we wanted them to really think about whether rules were real or whether they were perceived to be real. So we can't do that because, well, is that a real reason? Or maybe it's just a constraint within our mind. So we do it that way because of, or Bob has to do it because. Maybe it's not a task for Bob. Maybe somebody else could do it if we really, really thought about it. And then the final thing was that they can be really difficult to see, a little bit like this random picture of a fish. The fish can't see the water that it's within. It's got to kind of jump out of that bowl and take a look back to be able to see the water that it's in. So we wanted them to start thinking about leaping out of that fishbowl and taking a bit of a different approach to their work, have a look at it through a different lens. And we wanted to recognise that it can be hard to imagine doing things any other way. All of those, oh, we can't do that because of, it's going to be really difficult to do that, or to do that, we'd also have to do that. Pay attention to those areas as well. So we asked the teams in those sessions, and depending on how big those sessions were, if it was quite a small session, we pulled up a Google Jamboard. If any of you have used those before, it's just a virtual whiteboard. We created a load of virtual sticky notes and said, right, put down every mental valley that you might be in about the way that you work within your teams. We got them to fill up the board, and we could theme them then. There was a lot around, you know, around certain processes or around the way that finance is perceived in the wider hospital. So we kind of got to dig into them then. In bigger groups, we put people into breakout rooms to do that and then share that back as well. So we ended up with a whole host of things that we might be in a bit of a mental valley about, that we might need to think differently. So then we thought about how we might be able to escape some of them. So the first thing that you've got to do is you've got to recognise that you're in that mental valley. We've just done that whole big exercise with our virtual whiteboards. We've recognised some of the ones that we're in. But now we have to really actively try to escape that by collecting and rearranging that information and busting some of our assumptions, so that we can start to think about how we might be able to do things differently and use a bit of creative thinking. So we taught them about busting their assumptions, and so there can be purposeful channels like this. So I recognise I'm in a little bit of a mental valley. So maybe somebody else does the same work as me. I'll ask them how they do it, and I'll purposely carve out a channel to be able to do something different. But then there's also random jumps. Richard mentioned VMI earlier on. VMI are really great at this sort of stuff. And when they told us about one of their mental valleys around staff wanting flu jabs and vaccines, they just bought a load of vaccines, assuming that all of these staff would want jabs, and nobody was picking them up. And they were thinking, oh, but we've done everything that we normally do. We've set up clinics, we've bought everything. Why isn't it working? And they realised that they were in a bit of a mental valley about maybe how they'd approached it, and they did a random jump. They used some creative thinking, and they thought, what do our staff really like to do? They like fast food, they like a Starbucks, they love a drive-through. So they did a drive-through clinic. You didn't even have to get out your car. As you're driving out the car park on the way out, someone at the barrier went, hey, do you want your flu vaccine? Yes, I do, thanks. So it was a really random jump, a completely different way of doing something by thinking about how somebody else might do it. So once we'd busted our assumptions and maybe thought of a different way of doing it, we wanted to give them a way of being able to make that move. So how do I actually pull off this brand new idea that I've got? How might I be able to do something differently? So we taught them about PDSA cycles, which again is on the NHS website, and there's plenty of videos on YouTube. I think we played one from YouTube called PDSA 101. So that gave them a bit of support about how they can plan their change, how they can do a little bit, study some of that and act on it, and maybe do it again. You know, it isn't a one and done thing. Feel free to get it wrong the first time round and keep going round that plan. The key thing is to keep trying something differently until it works. So that's a whistle-stop tour of what we started our week with around busting some of our mental valleys. I'm going to hand over to Claire, who's going to take you through some of the concepts of mistake proofing that we went through with the teams.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. So there's many techniques that we could have taught the teams, but we wanted to almost teach them the things that we thought could make the most difference in their everyday sort of work, and also give them things that they could think about. So mistake proofing was one of the key sort of things that we've really focused on. So next slide, please, Natasha. So basically what mistake proofing is all about is making sure that you've got processes and systems in place that prevents errors and things going wrong. And within the Virginia Mason thing, it was all about first do no harm, because what they were doing was trying to make sure that they didn't harm any patients. For us, this has become more about getting things right the first time, because so much time can be wasted by having to do things twice or things going wrong. So what we wanted to make sure that we've got a real culture of let's get it right the first time. And this is where mistake proofing comes in as a really important tool. So next slide, please. So why should we mistake proof? So mistakes are one of the big sort of areas of waste, and mistake proofing is basically making sure that we take out mistakes and we don't get like a defective product. So we're not doing something that at the end of the day isn't going to be what we need. It might have an error in it or whatever. So it's all about the elimination of waste in terms of let's not make any mistakes. It has massive benefits. You don't have to do reworks, the quality is better, the cost should come down, our customers are much happier, staff are happier, saves lots of time. And as I say, there's a real link to patient safety here. So the tools we've tried to teach our teams can be used also by the sort of clinical staff. And there's a big thing about eliminating risk. So there's lots and lots of benefits from sort of focusing on this area, which is why we picked one of these as one of the key tools that we're going to teach people. So next slide, please. So there's lots of times when mistakes can happen, and there are situations which will make things more likely to have a mistake. So that's something else we wanted to help our teams to think about. When are the situations when things could go wrong, and being really aware of it. So common mistake prone situations are things like, you know, if you've got your procedures are not right, in a clinical world, you know, if your instruments aren't maintained, if you've got staff who don't do a task very often and therefore they might have forgotten what to do, if your sort of environment isn't conducive to doing things right, if you get new people in. I mean, we had an issue where a lot of our teams had changed, and it makes you realise when you get new people in how good your processes are, depending on how well they're trained and then how well people pick things up. You get lots of shortcuts and workarounds, and I think this is something as well to sort of, you know, a really key message for you all. Think and get your staff to think about how many times do we have a workaround in place. You might have information in lots of different places. We definitely had that. You know, if you're trying to find a procedure note, we managed to find about 6 with a different version on, all that kind of thing. And multiple handovers is a key thing when you're moving things between different staff. So what we were trying to get our teams to think about, when are the situations which makes it more common for things to go wrong? So next slide, please. So there's basically 4 different ways that we've taught our teams to think about how they can eliminate mistakes. And what this is all about is making sure that we draw attention to things going wrong before they actually do. So that's what this is all about, preventing errors and making things really, really obvious to people before things go wrong. So there's 4 different types, which I'll go through sort of quite high level. There's devices, there's visual controls, standard work and inspection, and they're 4 of the lean tools about how you eliminate mistakes. So next slide, please. So the first one, really simple, things like devices you can put in place that will tell you if you've got a problem, and things you can use to prevent things. So like simply using the spell check function, that's something personally, one of my bugbears. If I get something and there's spelling mistakes all over, it's such an easy thing to use your spell check. So that's one. Electronic forms that mean people have to fill things in and you have to fill a particular cell in. Drop down lists in Excel. So again, the teams have to pick from 4 options. It's not a voluntary field. And then simply like we have in our Outlook system, that if you are sending somebody an attachment and you don't actually attach it, you'll get a little warning message that tells you, should you be attaching an attachment. So they're the sort of things that we're trying to get people to think about. Can you use something or put some device in place that will stop you making a mistake? So that's category number 1. The next category is about visual controls. So visual controls are techniques that will really show to people and say, hang on a minute, there's a problem there and you need to solve it now. So it's about alerting people. So one of the things that we found with a big organisation, consolidating our information can be a nightmare. And as we all know, humans are humans, and not everybody will remember to do certain things. Not everybody will be bothered to remember and think, well, actually, that needs to balance. Oh, it's out by 5, but I'll do. So what we try to do within all of our consolidation exercises, we have built in, as you can see from this, control checks that the teams can use themselves that will tell them if they have not done something which is causing a problem in terms of our consolidation and our balancing. as you probably know, we do day one reporting, and this was really key because we can't report on day one if not everybody's done everything and that everything can't be consolidated. So that became really key. So within a lot of our processes now, you will see these kind of visual controls, and it means people don't have to check. So I shouldn't have to check whether my team have done their key reporting things. They should already know whether they have, and if they haven't, they should have already done something about it. So next slide, please. So the third one, and this is a really significant one, is the concept of standard work. And that's something that has become really, really key through our trust, and a key part of the Virginia Mason and the Leeds Improvement Method is about making sure we have standard work. And that's basically setting out what is the most efficient way to do the work and limiting the amount of non-value added tasks we have. And it's an ongoing process that you look at a process, you watch, you learn, you analyse, and then you document the best way of doing something. Once you've documented the best way of doing something, you make sure your staff are trained correctly, and then you make sure you check in. And it's a continuous cycle that we've put in place to make sure that we have got proper standard work. And that goes back to that procedure notes. You know, if you ask somebody, you know, in some of my teams when we started doing this, and I'd say, why do you do that? And then someone else will say, well, we haven't really got a procedure note. Somebody showed me when I started, and this is the way I've already done it. And then their colleague will pipe up and go, oh, I didn't know that. I do it like this. And it really shows where you don't have standard work. And if you think about all the assurance frameworks that we have in place, that concept of having standard work is really, really key. So areas to think about with our teams were like, had we got documented procedure notes? Had we got standard forms and templates? Were people getting the clear communication and standard messages? And this has then become very key part of our induction and our standard training. Because what we really want, and that picture of the rowing team, every single one of those people will know what the process is. They're all working in complete tandem, and for that boat to win the boat race, it's all got to work to an absolute T, and that's what we're trying to get to. And standard work has been something which is a terminology that we use now all the time. So next slide, please. And then the final sort of technique is about inspection. And that's about basically making sure that we've got a process that means that the end result is not defective. So again, for a patient, this is obviously massive, but even in our world, we want to make sure that we're not going to give our CSUs or our budget managers something that isn't right. And what we've really been careful about doing is making sure that we're not putting in people to check, because putting in lots of people checking is not the best use of resources. What we've tried to do is make sure that people are accountable for their own product, their own making sure it's right, and we're not then making it the job of someone else to check. So as you can see in this slide, there are different levels of inspection. You can put loads of people to inspect, but what we're trying to do is get to that level 6 where we eliminate mistakes as much as we can. You can never eliminate things fully, but that's what we're trying to get to. And basically that is about getting individual responsibility for quality and not thinking that it's their line manager's responsibility to check things. So that's the fourth sort of area. So next slide, please. So in summary, what we're trying to do is get people to be really, really clear and think about when can things go wrong, and think about 4 different ways they can use to make sure we don't have mistakes. And then the key thing is about making sure people get to the root cause, and you'll hear more about that later, that we really wanted people to not put workarounds in, and we wanted them to address the problem. And I think the key message from this is what we've found from our teams is the best solutions come from the people who know the equipment, the machines and the processes. The whole concept of standard work is about involving the people in the process. You know, I'm not the best person to write the procedure note for how people should do journals, but my team are, and that's what we've really tried to do. So this is kind of a flavour of the mistake proofing, and Natasha's now going to take us through an exercise that kind of illustrates this in a really powerful way. So back to you, Natasha. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry, my computer's just had a meltdown. I'm going to stop sharing and then reshare. And hopefully that will work. Not working.
Would you like me to share, Natasha? Would that help?
Yeah, you can do. I'll tell you what, for this next part, I can probably do it without slides.
Okay.
There's the thing. So, as Claire described, standard work was one of the things that we really tried to hammer home to people about being able to set people up to everybody be rowing in the same direction. If we don't have, one of the things that we say quite often is if we don't have a standard, then we can't improve upon that standard. We need to kind of remove all of the variation first so that everybody's got a standard way of working and then we can improve on it. So if you can all draw me, were you asked to get a pen and a piece of paper beforehand? I hope you all have one of those handy. So if you can possibly please get that pen and piece of paper for me and draw a grid that looks like this. She says, and then she can't find that either.
Does that help?
Oh, I can't see you anymore. Brilliant. Yes. Thank you. A grid that looks like this, a 6x6 grid, a 3x3 grid. Oh, it's nearly Friday. And you can tell. You give me a bit of a thumbs up or a nod when you're ready. Brilliant stuff. Okay. So on your grid, I want you to just draw me a pig. When you've drawn me a pig, can you hold it up to your camera so we can start to see some of these pigs, please? Who's going to be the brave one that shares their pig
Come on, Simon.
first?
Yeah,
Come
there
on,
you go.
yeah. Oh, so we've got a little pig in the centre, just the face of a pig from Anna. No body. Let's have a look. Any others? Oh, yeah, another tiny one in the centre. Another face. Face in the centre. Oh, sideways pig from Thomas. Enjoying that. But everyone's got a completely different pig. I had the vision of a pig in my mind, and none of you have read my mind and produced the pig that I would like you to produce. So if we're going to have a look at the next slide, please, Richard. So my first thing would be having some written instructions would be a better place to be right now. So maybe or some verbal instructions, should I say. So I'm going to give you some verbal instructions about the kind of pig that I want you all to draw. So if you can turn your piece of paper over, draw the same grid again, I'm going to give you some verbal instructions about what I want it to look like. And we work in a really fast-paced environment, so I'm going to whiz through these instructions and you need to be able to keep pace, okay? So instruction number 1 is draw the letter M at the top left intersection. The bottom centre of the M touches the intersection. And I can see a few horrified faces already going, oh, what? Okay, fast-paced environment. So step number two, I need you to draw the letter W at the bottom left intersection, and the top centre of the W touches the intersection. Okay. Step number, are we on 3? I don't even know whether we're on 3. Have I told you 3 yet? Draw the letter W at the bottom right intersection, top centre of the W touches the intersection. Simple enough. So step 4, draw an arc from the letter M on the top right intersection. Step 5 is draw another arc from the top right intersection to the bottom right W. And once you've done that, I need you to draw an arc between the 2 bottom W's, please. We're halfway through now, so brilliant stuff. On to step 7, which is draw the letter O in the left box. Well, you're all doing better than me. I have to do this usually for that section. Right, okay. Draw an arc from the letter M to the tangent of the circle. I hope you all remember back to GCSE maths. Okay. Draw an arc from the left W to the tangent of the circle. And draw an arc for the I halfway between the M and the circle, please. And then I want you to draw an arc for the mouth as well, halfway between the W and the circle. It's got to be a happy pig, please. Okay, and then I want you to draw the cursive letter E near the top arc on the right. And then finally draw 2 dots in the middle of the circle for the pig's nose, please. So let's have a look at everybody's pigs, please. They should all look the same now. Now I've given you some really in-depth verbal instructions. Let's have a look. Hold them up. Oh, that Thomas, quite a good one. Stephen slays like a Picasso pig, but closer to what I was wanting. But still, nobody's is looking the same. And if any of you gave up halfway through that, I do not blame you, because that's exactly what I would have done. And what we were trying to get people to think about then was, are verbal instructions good enough? We often know that they're not. That's why we write them down on our SOPs. How often within finance do we use really technical words as well, tangents and arcs and other things that if you're new to this profession, you're new to the NHS, maybe you don't understand those words and you might be too afraid to say that you don't understand them. Oh, brilliant time for the postman. So maybe then, if we can click on a section, please, thank you, Richard. Having some written instructions would be better. So what if I gave you them written down like this next? But if you can click along again, Richard. And again.
And again.
Perfect.
So,
if I'd have given you some written instructions, like we often have on our SOPs, we have a list of written instructions, don't we? Do you think this would have made it any easier for you? Possibly, yeah, a couple of nods, because you might be able to follow it in your own time. Nina?
What was the grid? Was it like a grid of 9 or was it a grid of 6? I mean, that's the thing which kind of started it off. And if you don't have that, and you don't get anywhere.
Exactly. So I didn't even really set you up very well, did I? I wasn't even really clear in the first place about what I was expecting, or I didn't set you up with the right equipment. How often do we do that with people? So what we also wanted to get at was maybe even with some written instructions, that might also not be very clear. So how could we take our written SOPs that we had and the things that we have and make them a little bit better? How can we create something a little bit better from them? So if we can click on again, please, Richard. Fabulous. Was to introduce standard work. So I've put a couple of circles on here to say, when you're writing your SOPs, can you include some visuals on there? So draw the letter M in that first step. Can we draw what people should be creating? We've told them where to draw it on the bottom center of the M touches the intersection. What if I don't know what an intersection is? I still don't know where to draw that, even if you've written those instructions for me. So can we indicate where we want them to do things? So can we make them a lot more visual, a lot easier to follow? And can we, like this little pig at the bottom, can we give them an example of what it is? How should it look? What should it look like at the end so they can follow all that through? So we really pushed people to think about their standard work and how they could improve that. So it's not just a list of written instructions that could still be interpreted wrongly. We wanted to really hammer home the fact that standard work should be robust enough that even if you're a brand new person within that role, you should be able to pick up that piece of standard work and have a really good go at it. So if we can go on to the next slide, please, Richard. We then asked the teams at the end of playing this game, we said, right, we want you to go back to your teams and review your standard work as a team. So create standard work where you don't have it. Review standard work while you do, because as Claire mentioned in that mistake proofing section, it's about continuously looking at that. If someone's figured out a better way of doing a part of your standard work, update it, share that information with everybody else so that everybody's doing the same thing. Make an agreement around where you store it and make it accessible as well. If you've got to go hunting for things and you're not quite sure which version of the standard work you're supposed to be following, that can be really difficult. So make an agreement about where you store it and how often you archive it and you keep everything up to date. And then review it going forward again, keep that continuous improvement methodology going, and do it all based on observation. As Claire mentioned in the beginning, it's all about observing the process, so that we're only writing in those steps that really do add value. Next slide, please, Richard. Yeah. So one of the final things that we really wanted to build into this week was around the concept of asking why in that root cause analysis, so that teams weren't just building in a workaround for something that doesn't work. And the tool that we taught them was a really quick, simple root cause analysis tool called 5 Whys. We have the next one. The root cause analysis is all about looking at that surface problem that you can see, the symptoms of that problem, but then really digging deeper to find the root cause of the problem, so that we're not just creating another workaround, or we're not spending our time thinking about, well, I get this and it's wrong, so I will fix it. Actually, we need to go back to the person that's given us that in the first place and try and remove that problem at the root cause. So we really wanted to encourage them to dig for the real why. So the example that we gave them around asking why 5 times, if you can click onto the next slide, Richard. I set them up with a problem that we walked through. So if you can click again, please. Okay, so I set them up with a problem. So when you're looking at 5 Whys, a really key part is to state your problem first of all. So state what you see is happening. So if I said my car won't start, if I ask why once, if I get in my car and it doesn't start, and I go, oh, why isn't my car starting? I might come up with my first why, which if you can click on, Richard, would be that my battery is flat. If I were to stop asking why at this point, I might go to the shop, buy myself a new battery, put it in my car, and find that actually it still won't start, or that hasn't quite solved my problem. If I keep asking why, my battery, if I say, right, well, why is my battery flat? My battery's flat because it's not that it's broken. There's nothing wrong with the battery, actually. It's just that it hasn't charged. Well, why hasn't it charged? The why that I would come to in that case is that the belt is slipping. Well, why is the belt slipping? I would get to the conclusion that the belt is really old and it needs replacing. Well, why has it got to the point that the belt is so old that it needs replaced? It's broken before I've replaced it. It's because I haven't been taking the car to get serviced. So the action, if I've asked why enough times to get to the root cause, isn't that I just need to go out and buy a new battery. That would be my workaround. It's that actually I need to be following the manufacturer's guidelines and getting the car serviced once a year, or however many miles it states in my book. So it's about really encouraging them to keep asking why. And what we did in the session was, if we can click to the next slide, was give them a little bit of time away from the camera. I said, camera's off 5 minutes, have a little think about a problem that you've encountered over the last couple of weeks and write out your 5 whys. State your problem really clearly and keep asking why. And told them, you might not get to the answer after 5. It might need to go on for 6, 7, 8, but just keep asking why until you get to your root cause. And then after that, they came back. Some of them shared their root causes with us and how they got to their whys. which was fascinating to hear about. And then if we can click on to the next slide. We put them into a breakout room then. So person A shared went through their 5 whys in depth, and person B listened. If we think back to those ground rules that we set at the beginning, we wanted to encourage them to be able to listen to other people's problems without speaking, without jumping in and offering their own. This is why I think it's happening. So it was a real opportunity for somebody to share and get a bit of insight, but for them to practice actively listening and to keep digging for those solutions. So after we'd done that, when they came back from that breakout room, we can click onto the next slide, please, Richard. We encouraged them to go back to their teams and to share their 5 whys with their teams and see whether their teams agreed or disagreed with the conclusions that they've come to. Could they do another 5 whys on the same problem but get to a different root cause as to why that had happened? Because that is quite often the case, and you might end up with a few different root causes that all have the same symptoms, the same problem occurs. And then to do some 5 whys with their teams and try and solve a joint problem through using that same PDSA approach that they'd used before. And some of those PDSA approaches became the problems that they then put onto their improvement plans. And I think Claire is going to go through those with us now, some of the outputs that we got from some of these sessions.
Okay, thank you. So what we were really keen about is, because some of us are advanced lean trained and we've obviously almost bought into all of this, but we wanted to make sure that somehow we made this real and not feel like we were teaching them a load of techniques and it wasn't relevant and how do you translate it. So we were really, really key that there had to be an impact and some outputs. So next slide, please, Richard. So we did 23 learning bursts. So the sort of techniques that Natasha and I have been sharing, we did and repeated them throughout the week. People could book in those sessions and we made them sort of 30 minutes and very, very focused on giving them some key tools and techniques. And we had about 308 attendances throughout the week, but we also did things in our own teams. So I think one of the key things that really came out of this was massive engagement from all parts of our teams. So next slide, please, Richard. So we had 105 ideas. We asked people to list the things that they thought, what had they thought of when we'd been going through this? Where did they think they could do things differently? Where do we make mistakes? And there was 105 ideas. Just move it on, Richard, please. Just keep going around that pie chart. Thank you. So the ideas that we got were ranged on things that individual teams could do. There were things that were wider organisational. There were things that multiple finance teams could do. And it ranged from processes that absolutely, you know, people would say that process does my head in. It could be things like emails were driving each other mad. Oh, many, many different things from different levels. But basically, we had really got quite a lot of outputs and different things. So next slide, please, Richard. So we then had to think about, crikey, we've now got 105 ideas. We've got an engaged finance team. How do we turn this into something and translate all that into something that we can actually deliver change with? So next slide. So there were a number of ways in which we did this. There were things where we needed to find out more about because people might have just said something and we thought, what do they really mean by that? So we then sort of set off various pieces of work around we need to understand more. We really worked on empowerment because there were a lot of things when we looked at the list and thought, well, why are people not just doing that? So there was a thing about really saying to people, no, we want you to run with that. We're saying to you, you were able to fix that. There were some things that we looked on the list and we just thought, oh, crikey, you just need to do it. So for some things we said, just do it. Then we said, right, there are some things that we're going to have to use our Leeds improvement method tools and really do a proper waste exercise around because there were complex things that involved a lot of different things and we needed to do proper projects, and I'll come on to some of those. And then Gemba visits have become something that we have in our trust now. So the idea of a Gemba is basically you go and see. So you don't think about something just anecdotally, you go watch. And we've gone into that sort of process where we say to people, go look, go see and ask why. Like Natasha's sort of gone through the 5 why process, but this is what this is all about. And then every quarter we have like a senior Gemba visit where our director of finance and our senior team go out to each of the teams and actually hear and look at what people, so we report out. So we've made it part of the day-to-day sort of way of working. So next slide, Richard, please. And then in terms of delivery, you know, I hate the phrase, but we have been on a journey. What we tried to do was make all these ideas, incorporate them into what we call our Finance the Leeds Way plans. So we have a process every year where each team has to set a development plan for the coming year about what they want to do differently and where they need to work. So we incorporated the key Waste Week ideas into the Finance Leeds Way plans, and the teams then started working on their own plans. So just move it on a little bit, Richard, if you just keep down that side. We've also made it been really careful to link it in with our Value Maker initiative, because we've also got our value makers who we want to keep that initiative going. So we've linked it in with them. So some of the ideas we have given our value makers to run with. So we've got different parts of the organisation, if you like, running with different things. And I suppose what we've tried to do is get people who are championing this and make sure we've got lots and lots of different people taking forward all these different things to make sure that we actually had delivery. So move it on, Richard, please. So when I highlighted some of those more complex things, so some of the more complex things like our waste reduction process, in the sense of our reporting and the way we track against schemes, was one of the areas that people felt was one of the things that we could be much smoother about and much clearer. And I think one of the things we've found is, and it's called the concertina approach, that we were quite good at bolting things onto our processes. So we realised if we needed something, or the organisation might have had an ask, and we bolt another bit onto a process. And before we know it, our original process, which was designed to do something, is now not fit for purpose for a lot of things because we've bolted so much on. So we've had what's called a Kaizen event, which has been a cross-team, very specific process looking at our waste reduction from end-to-end processes we're looking at, to make sure that we can look at everything that we need to do. Have we got standard work? Are we doing things in the right way? So some things are not quick, but some things we have actually implemented. So that's kind of our process that we've been going on. So next slide. And it's a big focus about eliminating waste. We've made that part of our everyday sort of language. So if we're thinking about impact, next slide, please, Richard. So lots of things in terms of impact. We've got ideas that we can all use. We've upskilled our teams, and I think that is a really key thing. You know, being a finance business partner, or whatever role we have within finance, these have given us some other things we can use that we can think, you know, as well as, you know, going to college and learning how to be accountants and things. This is a really key set of tools that we've given people. And they're transferable, because obviously a lot of us, depend on our roles, we're all linking in with our customers and our people within the hospital or whatever organisation we work in. These are things that we can use to help when we are looking at waste reduction programmes with our business managers and all that kind of thing. So it's given useful skills that we can use wider. It's made us work together more across our teams. We've got cross-cutting projects that we've put in place, and it's made people work together much better. And we've really made it business as usual. So continuous improvement has become part of our culture. People get less defensive about things that we say could be done differently. It's given us a language which has always made it okay to say, is that right? And can we do it differently? And then obviously we've eliminated waste. We've taken quite a lot of steps out of some of our processes and reduced our time to produce things. So final slide, I think. So key messages from us. What would we say if we were passing on how we've tried to make sure that we've got an improvement culture? We've really encouraged everybody to be part of the solution. What we didn't want was to get a list and somebody say, right, there's the list, who's going to solve it? We've really tried to make that we're all part of this and everybody's got a voice. We've really tried to encourage people to feel confident enough to lead and engage others. And you don't need to create formal projects for everything. Sometimes you just want somebody who puts the head against the parapet, above the parapet, and runs with something. And that's what we've tried to do. Big thing about don't rushing into the problem. And that's a big part of the Leeds improvement method. You don't know necessarily what the problem is. So before you rush into solving something, you've got to find out what the problem is to start with. don't be defensive. We've done a lot of work to try and get our teams to put themselves in other people's shoes and listen. And one of the big things that comes out of the Virginia Mason is a concept called big eyes, big ears, small mouth. And that's all about going out and looking and listening and trying to understand. Remember to question is another concept, and the 5 whys is an example. You know, people, it's okay to say why do we do that, all that kind of thing, and that's become again part of our culture. And then a big thing about remembering a solution is not a workaround, and that's what people do. People want to sort things out, but quite often they put in workarounds. So we've really tried to get away from this workaround sort of way of doing things. And then just finally, from I think from all of us, the benefits are huge, not just in terms of reducing waste, but it's made us a better department, better team. It's developing our individuals and developing ourselves as a team, and it's become a way of doing things. So I think they're probably our key messages. So I think, Natasha, Richard, have you got anything else to add before we sort of open it out to everyone for any sort of questions?
Not for me, Claire. Thank you.
No.
So we hope that's been useful. So anybody got any questions or things you'd like to hear more about? Or
sorry, it's not really a question. Are we going to get these slides
Yes.
emailed to us?
Yes, absolutely. We've shared them with One NHS Finance so that they can distribute them out to you all afterwards.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Stephen, have you somebody got a hand up, I think?
Thanks for the presentation. Really interesting to hear about the approach at Leeds and all the work that's gone into that. Are you able to share with us any of the kind of really good ideas that came out that you've been able to take forwards from there, respecting obviously the confidentiality lock that was on slide 1?
Yeah, I mean, we can share some other ideas. I think if we shared them after this as well. But I mean, just to give you a flavour of the things, they ranged from sort of emails. So that was one thing about email traffic is massive. And that was something that we really said, right, we need to be much more clear about when are we sending someone an email. So there were things that were kind of that kind of level. There are some things like the waste reduction process that we've mentioned that was a very specific. And then there was all other things. I mean, the processes that we use with our charity was one. So we've focused in on different areas. But we can share some of the sort of specific process improvement areas as a list, if that would be okay, if we send you like a general summary of some of the areas that we've looked at. And by no means we've not fixed all these. You know, we've not translated that 105 ideas yet into a full list of solutions. But yeah, we can send you some broad headings if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, I can't see hands. I think someone else has got the hands up.
Tracy's got a hand up. Oh, you might be on mute, Tracy, I think.
Sorry. I'm from Sherwood Forest. How do you get all the engagement of your team? We have a set dozen that are always happy to help and, you know, promote, but for the rest of the team, it is really difficult.
I think go on, Natasha.
Go on.
Go on. Go on.
I was going to say, so we really did lean into those people, you know, those, if you're talking innovation curve, those early adopters, the ones that really do want to get involved. We saw a lot of the same faces in each of those 23 learning bursts. It was the same people that were coming and really driving it. But I think one of the key things, especially around getting the team leads to sign that I'm in and this is what I agree to do beforehand, and carving out that time as a team. One of the things that we asked was that every single team has some protected time that week to talk about each of the ones that they've been to, and some of the ideas that came out of that meant that those ones that maybe hadn't come along to as many of the learning bursts as the others still then got involved, and still, you know, I learned this on my thing, but what do you reckon back? I think that protected time and that setup beforehand around getting the team leads to drive some of this stuff and ensure that teams really do talk about it helped bring some of those people that don't get as involved as naturally along with us for the ride, and create a bit more engagement in people that don't usually do that.
Thanks.
Any more for any more?
I think that's it, Becky, isn't it? Don't see any more hands raised.
No more questions.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.